Hey everyone, just a quick message today. Something that's been on my mind a lot recently is the obliviousness that Christians have in general and also specifically in relationships. We all came from it, so we know, what that means in terms of the Christian worldview. You could look at things like the Garden of Eden, the Noah story, all these other stories that we talk about so much, and you just say, are you really oblivious to the fact that your God is a psychopath if he were real? And they're just oblivious to it. They keep on calling him a good father, even when it's clear he's really a nasty character. On top of being a literary character, if he were real, he'd be horrible, and it wouldn't be a character you'd want to worship. And if you did want to worship him, you would be a bit of a psychopath yourself. When you look at that dynamic and you see how this is training our minds when we're Christians, the heavy indoctrination, to be so oblivious to the nastiness of this character, and then you think that is their model. It was ours, of course, but it's their model, it's their mentor, it's their hero, the one that they worship, the one that they follow. When you look at the bizarre nature, not just of the Yahweh character, but of the human dynamic with that character, to say, I am completely fine with how bizarre that behavior is of the Yahweh character, you can see how it could influence them being unable to see their own bizarreness of their own behavior. I'm dealing with that dynamic like on steroids in my home. It's awful, and they just don't see it. And it kind of reminds me of that part where Jesus is on the cross and he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. But are you all really that oblivious to the toxicity of your words, of what you say, of what you don't say, of how you live and what you choose to omit in terms of basic kindnesses? I talked before about even just saying hello or good morning or saying good night. They just stop because they're so put into a tailspin. And I'm going to talk soon more, both in terms of the short videos here, but also in terms of a huge presentation I'm working on that's going to talk about the depression that Christians go through when their close loved ones deconvert. And I'm sure it's different. I'm going to be speaking only from my experience, of course. I'm sure there's other people where they'd say, no, that really didn't happen for me. But for a lot of us, and a lot of people confirm it because they tell me their stories are very similar, a lot of us go through this situation where we see our search for truth puts them into a tailspin, ultra depression, ultra bizarre behavior, and they can't see it. And if you confront them on it, they feel like you're either not describing them correctly, or they're willing to admit it, but they're very self-justifying. There's a reason for that, and they certainly don't want to let you be the critic in any way, or the judge, or even just someone speaking wisdom or help into their lives, because you're not one of them anymore. Your ability to have wisdom to them has been decimated. But for today, again, a depression topic will come soon, but just dealing with the bizarreness of how they just can't see it. And I'm curious how some of you deal with it. I mean, maybe feel free to, email me. You can put it in the comments if you want to, but if it's more private, feel free to email me or Facebook me if you're there. But, this bizarre behavior where it's so painful and so toxic to live with, and yet they can't see it. They see themselves as perfectly fine. They see themselves even as perhaps healthy. It creates a dynamic where they have to portray a facade, a thick, truly like night and day Jekyll and Hyde facade, just to get through their lives. But when you live with people like this, when you live with people who are trying to live this facade, you obviously see right through it. The Christians don't. The Christians think, these are all just good Christians. But one of the things that it does give a benefit to in the long run is that children can see, and it's a cliche. This isn't my saying this, but it's a cliche that kids eventually grow up and figure out who which parent was the problem. They eventually figure out what was going on in the home. Kids don't stay kids forever. Kids grow up, they mature, they see other families, They read things, they read books about healthiness, they get counseling. They begin to put pieces together, and they begin to see what they want to pursue in their own lives, and they'll figure things out. But it works in your favor, and that's perhaps not the right way to put it, but if you're trying to help protect your kids, protect their minds, protect their hearts, their emotions, trying to get them to see what is going on here, because it's really weird to them, like, competing worldviews, competing messages. Their ultra depression that they go into, the fact that this, joy of the Lord that's going to be their strength and this peace that passes all understanding, it's much more reflective of those who don't have Christ than those who do. It's much more reflective of the atheists in the family than those who go to church and claim Christ and preach the gospel. But you realize that this bizarre behavior is their own undoing. It's the cracks in the dam, the cracks in the wall that are showing there's nothing there. This is all, and we knew it was make-believe. It's not like we need to see someone's life and analyze them to figure out if Christianity is true. This is about the propositional truth of Christianity and about the historicity, all that stuff, versus, does this person in this current day and age live like a Christian or not. I didn't see that as a test of Christianity before my deconversion. I certainly don't see it as a test now. But there is a general principle that if you are truly a Christian who's living with Jesus in your heart, and the Spirit is transforming you, then you're going to have a beautiful life that's going to attract people to you. The honesty, the being honest with yourself about who you are, about your weaknesses and foibles, about your strengths and all that. The ability to improve and say, I'm this person today, but I want to get better. The ability to impress, where you just say, I'd love to be like you. Your heart, your mind, like, that's an attractive person, not physically, but like emotionally, mentally, psychologically. That's a person I want to follow in their footsteps. And people's, spouses, kids, they eventually look at this dynamic and the strong contrast, and they're like, there's no contest. Christian people don't have the joy of the Lord. Christian people are frequently nasty. They're frequently just grossly dishonest. They twist things. They gaslight you. They abuse you. Hyper abuse you. And it takes the kids, my kids, being very, very physically abused, scratched, pinched, choked, their hair being pulled, dragged across the room by their collar, held down on the ground repeatedly. And that's, I've dealt with that in other videos. But, you look at that stuff, it's like, these are hyper abusive people. And they may not be able to do all those physical things to the other adults like myself, but the psychological abuse is still very prevalent. And it's become a mental cliche for me, this idea, just use the acronym PACN, passive aggressive Christian narcissists. But, when you are up close and personal, where this is like, it's in your face, these are passive aggressive Christian narcissists who truly think that they're just fine. You're like, I'm fine. And you're like, you're not only not fine, you're like really not fine. This is really unhealthy. And when you get to that point where you recognize that they can never recognize it, it's, of course, from our perspective, very depressing, because you're like, I was kind of hoping that your eyes would open. I was kind of hoping that you'd see both the bizarreness of the Christian worldview, but even just of the bizarreness of your own behavior, the toxicity across the board, the gross dishonesty. I thought you would see it, and that maybe we could eventually have some honest conversations. But they don't want the conversations. They don't want to open up those doors to them. It's like Pandora's box. They want to keep it closed. And the truth hurts too much. The truth about Christianity and Judaism, the truth about the Bible, and very personally, the truth about them. They want a facade that says, I'm just a good old-fashioned, salt of the earth Christian that just loves the Lord, loves my family, and wants to make a difference for eternity. And when you dig deeper, you're like, that's not what it shows. The evidence doesn't show that that's what's happening here. the evidence shows some really nasty behavior. When you're in the shoes like I am, where you're dealing with this day in and day out, their passive aggressive Christian narcissism tendencies, their ultra depression that they're in because they're now dealing with the fact that their worldview it's not adding up. Their family's not Christian anymore, but now it's like it's not adding up to them. The cognitive dissonance in their hearts must be on just so much overdrive that it's depressing to us, as even though we're so free, have so much peace from being released from this crazy worldview, that when you look at just having it up close, you can understand why some people say, I just need to walk away. And, some people just say, I'm done with my marriage. People have asked me many times, why don't you just go? And I get that a lot. And number one, from close friends, that's a question that's appropriate. From strangers, I'm like, you really think that I'm going to explain the inner workings of my heart to a handle that I don't know who you are? I don't know what your worldview is. I don't know where you're coming from or where you're going. I don't know anything about you. I'm not going to answer those by and large. I'm not going to, defend myself, so to speak, to some internet stranger. But I do have some close friends who, ask me those questions, and I respect them. Why don't you just move on from such toxicity? You haven't been able to touch your own wife for 3+ years. The constant nastiness, the constant snark, the constant coldness. Why do you do it? And I've given the answer several times, and people kind of come back and like, yeah, but why are you still there? I'm like, well, the answer was what I gave in the first place, which is to protect the children's minds. People will say, yeah, but you could protect them better separate. 50-50 is not good enough for me. I don't want that worldview. I don't want that world. I don't want that perspective where I'm, giving them some of my time. I want to give my kids as much of my ability to be there for them, and not just protect their minds, but protect their bodies. Be there as a support system. And there's 100, maybe a couple hundred different things that would happen in a given day and week where there's just little interactions that build up the trust between us. That's a lot more important than my, forced celibacy. My sex life is absolutely second or, 100th to the ability to give the kids healthiness. And I think that's, for those of you that are parents, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Sex is urgent in our minds, but sex can wait. These kids need to be protected. When I go, step back and look at this in the big picture, I obviously don't know where this is all going to lead. It obviously breaks my heart every day. And I get it why people say, why would you stay in that? You're just being crushed. There are people who have, I think, really helped me a lot to say, if you're going to stay in this, and you have your own reasons, everyone's going to handle it differently, but if your reasons tell you stay, at least for now, and you have ways to protect the kids that you otherwise wouldn't have, therefore this is important to you, then you have to have some coping mechanisms. Whether you're talking about in terms of sexuality, you're talking about obviously masturbation, or a lot of exercise, getting out of nature when you can, just feeling connected to the world, feeling like your body is connected to something, even though you don't have physical touch, and that's so important. Obviously you have hugs from kids and stuff, but I'm talking about the sexual side of life that you just wish you could have that with your spouse. But when you add this whole thing up, you do have to find ways to protect your own heart, protect your own mind, your own emotions, because you're being actively and passively hurt by your spouse, your partner, but maybe, in your case, by your parents or somebody, loved ones that are attacking you. You have to have some way to have a happy place, some way to say, I'm gonna ignore them and shut out the world, so to speak. Whatever it is, everyone's gonna have some kind of antidote to the poison, some kind of way to separate themselves from it mentally. For me, it's obviously the stuff I've been talking about in the last few videos, so I won't rehash all that. And of course the channel is a big part of my world too. Channels at this point. But I really want to encourage you, those of you especially that are really hurting, where it's like, this is nuts, this is absolute cuckoo bananas, I can't stand this for another minute, but I have to stand it for the next 5 or 10 years. I can't believe I have to put up with this for another few seconds, but there's no end in sight. And it's like, it's a psychological torture. And in some ways, I think the Christians know it. Maybe some of them are trying to drive some people to move on. Say, I'm just going to make your life a living hell to the point that you just don't want to be with me, because I really don't want to be with you, but I can't technically divorce because you didn't have an affair. So, and you didn't abandon me. So I'm just going to make your life so horrible that eventually you'll just be like, I'm done. And there's a time in that context to be done, for sure, granted. But for those of us that, are staying, it does make you wonder too. Eventually, they don't, like, they've cut off their ability to see your goodness. You can be a good parent, a good friend, a good companion, whatever. But to them, they've cut off the intimacy. They've said, and I don't just mean sexual, I mean any intimacy. They've said, I don't want to be intimate with you because of your, worldview shift. When you deal with that, like for days and weeks and months and eventually years on end, it just crushes you. It breaks your heart daily. It crushes you. And that becomes your new normal. And you really have to watch yourself. And I'm saying this to myself too. Like, we really have to watch ourselves, because number one, it's painful. But number two, there's a form of, like, when we were in Christianity, they were distorting reality and trying to get us to be like, this warped reality is actually reality. And even though we're out of the mythology part of it, that's done. They're still in many ways trying to take this distorted reality and say this is reality, to say that they are good people, they're good-hearted people, they're loving people, they're patient, they're caring, and they're obviously so not. But when you look at this, you can get crushed. You really can get crushed. And I say this to myself and to you as the viewer: please guard your heart, please protect your mind. Don't let the naysayers become the dominant voice in your head. The dominant voice in your head, of course, needs to be yours, assuming you're fairly healthy and moving along the right path. Obviously, if you have dark things going on where you're, despairing of life, don't just listen to yourself. But, if you're on a right trajectory and you just have naysayers on the side kind of heckling you, do your best to ignore the hecklers. The hecklers are not going to be here for the whole story. This is, a chapter, perhaps 2 or 3 chapters. There's a lot more chapters to come. The hecklers, it is what it is. You can't stop them, but just don't let them dominate your narrative in your head or in your life. That's what I'm trying to do. And it becomes like, that becomes in some ways the predominant game. The predominant game is not just, there's things you do, like your circles of life. I'm working here, I'm paying bills here, I'm taking care of the kids here, I'm whatever, communicating to people. There's little circles that you're touching, but in the midst of, for me, working on the YouTube channel, working on this and that and projects, there's like this lava underneath the mountain. It's like it's always there, and you don't see it because the mountain's kind of quiet. But there's this lava that's flowing, where it's a constant battle to kind of not keep your actual sanity, but just to keep your emotional sanity. To say, I have people, feet away from me, who are living as if they just want to trash my heart every chance they get. That's hard to deal with, for years. When you're talking about years at a time, you have to keep that lava flow of self-protection up. And I'm not talking about walls where you say, I'm not going to be vulnerable anymore, people suck, and I just want to, live my own life as a isolationist. There's obviously seasons for that. But I'm talking about still connecting to people, but to the people that are, the specific people that are wounding you, passively or actively, to change the dynamics in your head so that you have a thick skin and they can't get through. They just can't get through. And sometimes it's as simple as just saying, I'm just not going to talk to you about anything serious. Like, anything serious is off the table until you obviously apologize and make it right. But they're not, that's what has to happen, but they're not going anywhere near that path. So you really have to get to a point where you're saying, like, I predict for years to come, we're not going to have a serious conversation, and I'm just not going to let it happen. And one of the weirdest things that happens to me in my home is, it is very passive aggressive. It's eggshells. It's horrible. But then eventually, like every once in a while, there'll be this woven in moment of like levity, like, oh, so this one of our kids did this funny thing. It was so funny. I want to tell you. I'm like, you realize in the context, like you've been nasty to me for years, years and years and years, every day, dozens of ways, every day, and you suddenly want to kind of, make light, make talk about something that's really light and funny. Like it doesn't start there. You can't be a traitor. You can't be a hyper abuser, and then just like let's laugh together. You wouldn't do that with any abuser. You wouldn't go out for pizza and let's hang out. Now that you've abused the shit out of me, let's hang out and have a good time and have a beer. No, like that's not how it works. And one boundary I've set up is just for my wife. I'm just not going to go anywhere with her. Like I'm not going to the park. I'm not going to the mall. I'm not going. We don't spend much money right now anyway because it's like hyper, tight because of me being trying to build up the YouTube channel and then kind of begging for donations as you've heard. But if there is a chance to go out somewhere, and one thing I do, we have a lake that's 20 minutes north of us. It's Lake Lanier. It's really pretty. There's some beaches there where it's like the most beautiful day, and you'd think there should be hundreds of people on this beach, and it costs like $5 to get in, or if you do a season pass, $25, and you can go there any day you want to. And you're like, the beach is empty for hours. It's all mine. It's lovely, and I take the kids there a lot to Lake Lanier. But I'd love to go with my wife, but I'm not going to, because I have that boundary now of I can't keep pretending. And even the other part of that too is just the looking. When I as a man look at my wife, I'm very attracted to her physically. Of course, the female body is just, it's on my mind every second of the day. I'm thinking constantly about her curves. I love to see a woman's body. But if you're in a spot where when you look at your wife, you're attracted and you want to touch her and reach out to her and you just can't, eventually that becomes like a tease. So you literally have to look away because you're like, if I look at you, I'm going to want you, and I can't do anything about it, so I have to look away. Now, how any spouse, how any person would say, I want to set up a paradigm where I want you to no longer feel comfortable even looking at me. I don't get that. And I've even had it said to me at times where I would just kind of be looking at her and she can probably tell I'm thinking she's beautiful. And I've had her literally say, like, stop admiring me. Stop admiring me. Your own spouse, your own wife. But, when that dynamic continues, where you're like, why would I want to go to a beach where you might be in a bathing suit and I can't even look at you? But those are the kind of things that you have to think through. How do you protect your mind and your heart from just going crazy, from going insane, from you literally have like a tormentor at your side? How do you live with a tormentor at your side? Everyone's going to be different. Obviously, some people are going to be like, to hell with that. I'm out. In some ways, I'm obviously, mentally out. But for the sake of the kids, I'm obviously very physically here and mentally here with them, emotionally here with them. But, this is some serious and dark stuff. I mean, really dark stuff. And if you're not careful, it'll eat you alive and spit you out. So, I'm doing what I can. I'll probably talk more about some of the details of what I do in my life in future videos. But I want to encourage you, and don't feel like I'm not saying you should do anything of what I'm doing. Do what's right for your heart and your mind, and trust in your own understanding. Trust your own gut. Believe in yourself. Believe that you have your own best interest at heart, and you should. But do what's right for you. But please do not let these abusers, these people that are truly passive-aggressive Christian narcissists who truly want you, they're hyper-controlling. They want you and the kids and everyone to just believe like them. They have Christian stuff all over the house. They wear, she wears T-shirts with Bible verses on it, like in your face. I'm like, I wonder how comfortable they would be if, I wore a T-shirt and that said, we are the awesome atheist family. Like, how would you feel if I did it back to you? Where here's, you have John 3:16, whatever, on your shirt, wearing it around all day long for 10 hours. And, maybe I should wear a T-shirt that says we are the awesome atheist family. But When you look at this, they can't see how nasty and horrific they are, but you can see it. You have to deal with it. Do what you can to find your happy place. Go to Tahiti in your mind, emotionally speaking, but build your community up. But please know, I have a lot of you. I've had probably several dozen people say some very similar things to me that they're going through in the last few months, and confirming that this is Christianese. This is what Christians do in these cases. There are going to be some exceptions, of course. There's going to be Christians who would respond to a deconverted spouse with absolute grace and love and patience and just be like, we're all on a journey. I love you the way you are. I will help you. I want to show you the love of Christ because I still believe it. I believe it wholly, but I love you, and I'm going to love the socks off you whether you're a Christian or an atheist. That's awesome. For those that have that, wow, like wonderful. But for those of us that don't, and that's just, pie in the sky dreaming, please be careful with what's going on. Sexually, the forced celibacy stuff will eat you alive. The lack of the emotional celibacy, the fact that they don't really care. Like I don't even know if my wife ever watches my channel. I've never seen any evidence that she does. She may, but there's no evidence. There's no interaction of like, I saw that interview. That was interesting story. Obviously, I don't agree with the conclusions of your guest, but interesting journey there. The fact that they just kind of ignore your whole life, you become reduced to a paycheck. The questions are, can you pay my bills? Can you take the kids when I'm tired? Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you keep the car running? Can you fill it with gas? You're reduced to a butler. You're reduced to a paycheck for them. And if they can ride that ticket for a long time for free, they will. And that sucks. That really sucks. And when you realize that's what you've been reduced to, you're a paycheck and a butler and a mechanic. You're not a partner. You're not even a roommate. You're certainly not a spouse and a lover. It blows you away. It's like, wow, what has this become? This is freaking dark stuff. And this is exactly what so many Christians will do. It's proof in the pudding that Christianity does not have power to change lives. Because if they did, then all this stuff wouldn't be happening. It's not changing their life. It's not making them attractive. It's making them absolutely filthy ugly emotionally. The trust is decimated, and every day they just dig the ditch deeper. It's like, can we just like stop all the damage that's been done? Just like have a peacefulness and just say, okay, you believe this, I believe this, but we can at least still be really friendly and caring and patient and loving and kind, just to not make this situation worse. And I've said this to some of my close friends before, but my situation, she finds new ways to be nasty. Like when I think this can't get much worse, she finds new ways to be nasty every single week and sometimes every day. And it blows me away. I'm like, how can this keep getting darker than it already is? It's like it's pitch black. How can it get much darker outside? But they find ways. All the starlight that's coming, so to speak, they shut out every single star until it truly is darker. When you deal with that, the joy that's coming naturally from escaping Bible prison is heavily offset by the negativity of dealing with them. Don't let them confuse you. Don't confuse yourself. Dealing with their depression, dealing with their narcissism and passive-aggressive abuse, that is depressing to you. But that is not the same thing as you being depressed because you're not a Christian anymore. They're two different things. And all things being equal, if they were even had a modicum of respect for you and your personhood and your journey, you would be able to deal with this so much more healthily and just say, just matter of fact, I'm so much happier without this mythology garbage. But because you're dealing with them, some of you, I know, because you write me, you're tempted to feel like this wasn't worth it. Or what's, is it worth it? And does it get worth it later? And in my opinion, the search for the truth and getting rid of as many bad things as they talk about, any false things as possible, is absolutely worth it. So longer than I thought today. That's what she said. This is longer than I thought today, but I hope you hear my heart coming through. I love you all. I feel so pained for your stories. Thank you for sharing them. Again, I respond when I can. I can't always do it right away. Thank you for trusting me with your stories. The emails come in like crazy, and I know some of you know exactly what I'm talking about and worse. I care about you. Like I said in a previous interview or so ago, or chat or two ago, feel a big hug from me. But take care of yourself. Take care of yourself, please. We'll get through this. This season will pass. This is not harvest time yet. This is, we're planting seeds, and sometimes there's storms. Sometimes the seedlings, come up, and then there's a storm that kind of ravages a little bit. The intense sun kind of wilts it a little bit. We'll keep on planting. We'll keep on fertilizing. We'll make our own hearts and our own homes as much as possible fertile ground for growth, healthiness, and less toxicity, for truth, for honesty, for beauty. Keep planting those seeds. Eventually, I believe this will pay off. Maybe not everybody's marriages can be salvaged. Maybe not everything that we want can come true anytime soon. But, giving the next generation a great head start on escaping mythological worldviews and on understanding what toxicity looks like, because they've seen it so up close and unfortunately so personal. When they see that, we're giving them a chance to say, I reject these bad ideas. I reject this nasty behavior. I want a different future for myself. And I'm not asking anyone to be a martyr. There are days it feels like I'm a bit of a martyr. But, look at the big picture. Look past your own needs and your own needs, the wants of the day. Look at the big picture and say, what will be the best way to build something beautiful that, 3, 4, 5 years from now, what will this look like? And if you do choose to stay in something hard and difficult like I've chosen to, just keep on looking for ways to mitigate it, because it's not sustainable in some ways. But if you're going to choose to sustain it, then you have to make sure that your heart is somewhere else emotionally. Again, through the exercise, through your hobbies, but you have to have a way to tell your heart, this is not all there is. This is not all there is to your life. Your life is something different. Your life is something separate, better, more beautiful. And your kids need to know that message, both for you. They need to know you're better than this, abusive situation, and that they're better and that they're protected. So I hope that comes through. I hope you hear my heart in this. But I've made this a bit of a longer video than I meant to, but sometimes it helps to just kind of have the freedom to share what's in your heart. So for those of you that stayed this long, thank you. Most of my videos will not be this long on this channel, but every once in a while, you just got to kind of let it pour out. And I know some of you find it helpful, and I really do hope that it does help some of you in your journey. And again, I care about you, and I wish you well in your life, in your hard situations. Hang in there. Let's hope for better days, but let's plan on them not being better days anytime soon, so that we can plan for the worst and just choose to make it stronger. These storms may not pass, but we can fortify ourselves. Fortify your mind, fortify your heart. Anyway, thanks so much. Have a great day.